Hi, my name is Amanda Payne and I am a trustee of a charity called FND Action. Today is FND Awareness Day UK. FND stands for Functional Neurological Disorder, which encompasses a diverse range of symptoms, including functional limb weakness, movement disorders, functional and dissociative attacks or non-epileptic seizures, sensory problems, cognitive problems, visual and speech symptoms. While the symptoms may appear similar to neurological diseases, including those of multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's and epilepsy, and can be just as debilitating, they are not caused by structural disease of the nervous system, but a problem with the functioning of a nervous system. I'm here with Dr. John Stone, a consultant neurologist who specialises in FND. He's also responsible for the neurosymptoms.org website, which is a leading worldwide resource for people diagnosed. Thank you very much, John, for agreeing to take part in this Facebook Live interview
it's great to be here.
for allowing me into your home.
My pleasure.
So, firstly, can you tell me a little bit about your background and what it is that led you to become interested in functional neurological disorders?
Yeah. Well, a number of things, I guess. I had a childhood stammer, which was sort of developmental, I think, and it did improve. And when I was older, it came back in situations where I was quite anxious, and I think became something of a functional stammer. It still appears from time to time. Might even appear today. So that was one thing, and I was always that puzzled me. I developed an interest in neurology and psychiatry as a medical student, and I loved both of them. And when I started to do neurology, I came across lots and lots of patients with functional disorders. Who had weak legs and seizures and movement disorders. And I was really quite shocked by how lacking knowledge we were of them and the attitudes of many of the neurologists towards them. Not all of them, but some neurologists. And I think mostly they didn't know what to make of these patients. And I could see there was a huge sort of need there of someone to take an interest, but also even just from a purely scientific point of view, why is this happening? Why do people have weak legs? Because it was quite clear to me that people were genuinely experiencing these symptoms. So the condition spanned my interest in neurology and psychiatry because it's a disorder very much at the interface between those two things. And that's where it started really. That was in the mid-1990s. Right. Yeah.
So when things weren't perhaps quite so well known.
When things were really, there was very little research at that time. Things were just starting to be published in research and things like that, but it's only come about very slowly. It was considered, in fact, some of my neurology bosses were quite concerned about my interest in this area. They thought maybe it was a risky thing to be interested in, but I've never regretted becoming interested, and still I think there's so much to find out, and it's one of those conditions that perhaps we'll never get completely to the bottom of, but we've got a huge amount of things that we can do, I think, in terms of research.
Great. Well, obviously we're really pleased that you've got interested in it because it works very well for us. So perhaps the first question should be then, why is it such a little known condition, even amongst medical professionals, considering it has been known about under various names for at least 100 years?
Indeed, yeah. So the symptoms, they have been really ignored for a long time. So it's interesting actually. In the late 19th century, there was a period where neurologists were much more interested in the condition and did actually do lots of interesting research and thought very hard about the problem. And then it became, at the early part of the 20th century, it became a condition that was very much associated with psychiatry and Freud in particular.
Yes.
He came along with the idea that these symptoms were due to psychological stress and that people had converted that stress into a physical symptom. I don't completely throw out all of those ideas, but I think what we know, my own view is that is a much too narrow view of the problem. So there are patients in whom you meet where there's a lot of stress, psychological stress, and you think, well, that may be somehow relevant into why their nervous system no longer functions properly. But quite clearly patients where that's not the case.
Right,
and they haven't had stressful events and they haven't had adverse experiences. But what happened in the 20th century was that neurologists were looking at these patients and saying, well, this is not neurology, this is psychiatry. And so they really thinking, well, that's not what I do. My job is just to exclude disease. And it's only been in the last 15 or 20 years really that neurologists are starting to become saying, actually, this is what we do. These are people with neurological symptoms. Actually, there is a very interesting story about what is going wrong in the brain that explains why people's legs don't work and why they have tremors, why they black out. And so hopefully the point that we're heading to, we've still got a long way to go, but the point where we're heading to is a disorder where it is just a routine part of neurological practice, but that we still involve psychology and psychiatry and physiotherapy and a whole multidisciplinary team.
So like a collaborative care.
Where it's appropriate to do so.
Yeah. Okay. So our next question is actually about diagnosis. So some people get their diagnosis from a properly qualified neurologist such as yourself, following a range of tests to discount other conditions, whilst others are just given the diagnosis by their GP with very little or even no testing.
Yeah.
So what tests should be done and by whom?
I think really for nearly all patients, there's a general consensus that this is a diagnosis that should be made by someone with expertise in neurological conditions. So that isn't always a neurologist. It might be a stroke physician, it might be another physician. Some GPs do have a special interest, but it needs to be someone with a lot of expertise because the diagnosis depends on recognising the positive features of a functional disorder, and those it's quite easy to get that wrong in terms of, and also thinking about, does the person with a functional disorder also have another neurological condition, which is important. So generally speaking, you're looking for a neurologist to make the diagnosis, I would say.
Right. So obviously for people who have seizures, the normal route would be to have an EEG, perhaps a video EEG, or even like a video telemetry actually in a hospital.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, so tests like that can be helpful, but they're only really helpful if someone actually has a seizure while they're having the test. And that's actually probably less than half of patients will have a seizure like that. So the diagnosis we're very reliant on for seizures on the witness history, someone who's actually seen it. We're increasingly benefit from smartphone videos that friends and family take. They're very useful. And tests are useful if they can be useful, but it's I think the general public they overestimate how useful the tests are.
The tests are, yes.
And you're still looking for seizures, for example. It's all about what does the seizure look like. The fact that the EEG, which is the brainwave test during the seizure, is normal, well, that's helpful in that it makes epilepsy, for example, quite unlikely. But you still want to know what is it, not what it's not.
What it's not, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So one of the tests that's done for functional neurological disorder itself, and for people who perhaps have paralysis or weakness, is the Hoover sign.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that, and perhaps we can have a little bit of a demonstration?
Yeah.
We have practiced this, but we can't promise it's going to be as good as we practiced.
Yeah. So for functional motor disorders, those people who have weak legs or tremor, it's very important that to understand the diagnosis of FND is not, it should be made positively on the basis of the positive signs the patient has. You do not make a diagnosis of FND just because the tests are normal, because it looks a bit weird, or in some cases people are making diagnoses because someone has psychological problems. Now, all of those things are bad practice. That's how you make misdiagnosis. So what you're looking for is evidence in the examination that someone has a pattern of weakness, a response to testing that's typical of what we know is FND, functional disorder. So yeah, so shall we have a go at demonstrating
We'll
who the
have a go, yeah.
So we're going to
So
move
we're just going to move the camera down, so you're going to get to look at my legs, everybody, which is lovely for you. Here they are.
Right. So now one of the difficult things to understand here is that for some of these signs, they're actually positive also in someone who might be pretending to be weak. Now that's people with FND are not pretending. This is a genuine condition causing massive amounts of disability. But the signs are similar. That's another reason why this condition has been ignored, because doctors faced with these sorts of signs have thought, well, is this patient just pretending? And then you often use that as an excuse not to be interested in the problem, whereas it's quite clear that people are not pretending. This is a genuine problem. So, but for the purpose of this, Amanda, you're going to actually pretend to have a weak for this leg here, to be weak.
I mean, I do have some weakness in this leg anyway, but yes, it's not as weak as somebody.
Yeah, you're going to make it a bit weaker than
so it's just going to be weak leg then.
So what we'll do is, so if I could get you to lift up this, so this is your good leg, and keep it in the air and show me how strong that is. And you can, I can't push that down, so it's nice and strong. And just lift up this weak leg best you can. And you can't really lift that off the ground as we're doing it today. Now I'm just going to come around the back here. Just to demonstrate that if you push this heel into the ground for me.
Okay.
This leg, maybe wind it down.
Oh, no, can't possibly. Okay.
But
I'm pushing my heel into the ground and my leg's not really lifting until...
Well, actually, if you keep your heel on the ground, you should be able to... I cannot lift that heel off the ground, so that's a normal response.
Okay,
If we come back over here and try and keep this heel on the ground in the weak leg, I can lift that heel off the ground. So there's a difference.
Yeah.
But now if we lift up this good leg again, keep that in the air, stop me from pressing down, and I want you to focus on that knee and really stop me from pressing down.
Okay, I'm really looking at that knee.
Just do what you did a moment ago. Now when I do that, I've also, as you can see, I've got this hand under this weak leg. And what happens when you're focusing on that right leg is that the weak left leg comes back to normal.
Yes.
I can.
Because it's quite difficult to be focusing on both knees at once.
And now, so what we've been able to demonstrate, if we go back now to this weak leg, and if you try and keep that heel on the ground, when you're trying to make the movement, it's not working. In fact, the more you try, the worse it gets, and that's very typical in patients with functional motor disorders. The more that they think about the movement, the more they try and really make it move, the less it works. But when you lift up this knee, again, but when you're focusing on this good leg, that produces an automatic movement in the body, and the movement in the left leg comes back to normal. So what that's telling us lots of interesting things. There, it's telling us that there's a disorder of something to do with voluntary movement, where the more someone's brain tries to make the movement, the worse it gets. But actually, the automatic movements are there. So it's not due. It can't be due to damage to the nervous system. It must be due to some form of abnormality of function of the nervous system. So that's why they're called functional disorders or FND.
Okay, cool. So following on from that question, often the diagnosis is given in an unclear way, leaving the person feeling confused as to what is exactly going on. And so many people report that the only information they're given is a link to your obviously very excellent website, Neurosymptoms.
On its own, that's not enough, is it?
But what, in your opinion, should be the correct way of giving the diagnosis? And is there any moves to put to ensure that there is actually a standardised diagnosis?
Yes, I'm aware that happens a lot, that communication of this diagnosis is not, people don't necessarily take the time to go through it and help people understand something that's really it is quite difficult to get your head around. People haven't heard of it. These physical signs I'm showing you, that even when you see them, they take some time to sort of understand. I think what often happens is that doctors, I think most doctors who see patients with this are sympathetic and do believe the patient, but they handle the communication in a way that is unhelpful and can several things that tend to go wrong. So one is that the doctor spends a lot of time emphasising to the patient what they don't have.
Correct. Yes.
So someone who's having seizures, I say, oh well, it's good news. Your EEG was normal. You don't have epilepsy. Okay, well that's helpful. Or you don't have MS. But really, people want to know what they do have first and foremost. And so that, I think often the way people discuss that it comes out weird for the patient. They're being told what they don't have. Why aren't they being told what they do have?
What they do have, exactly.
And then very often doctors will then jump, without explaining what they do have, they'll jump to talking about stress or psychological factors, and sometimes those are relevant, but often they're not relevant. Obviously, to a patient where they're not relevant, or even to a patient where they are, they're thinking, what's going on here? I haven't been told what I've got, and now they're telling me it's due to stress. For a lot of people, that's quite similar to being told that it's all in your mind, you're imagining it, you're faking it, and the whole thing is at that point is just going very badly. It's actually, I think it's relatively straightforward for people just to put that right. If they just say to patients, you have functional leg weakness. I know I've seen this many times before. This is not medical mystery. Only patients with functional leg weakness have that pattern of weakness. Here's the sign, and this is why I'm saying what I'm saying. We know from the test you haven't got any other condition as well, so that's good. And it's got the potential to improve. And I think if we just focus more on what's the mechanism for these symptoms, there's something going wrong in the brain. The reasons for that are complex. They vary a lot from person to person. And take it from there, really. That's often a better start, in my experience. But yeah, obviously it is. And then things like online information and patient support groups are very helpful, because people can go away and think about it and come back with questions. But on their own, I appreciate it's not enough.
No.
You need to have a relationship and trust with your health professional, and for the patient themselves to become confident that they've met someone who knows what's wrong with them.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Okay, so if you've just joined us, I'm Amanda. I'm one of the trustees of a charity called FND Action, which is a charity that was set up just last year to help people with non-epileptic attack disorder and functional neurological disorder. I'm here with Dr. John Stone, who is the consultant neurologist at the Western General Hospital in Edinburgh, and we're talking about functional neurological disorder, and non-epileptic attack disorder. I'm hearing that you're having a little bit of trouble with the sound, so perhaps we might scoot a bit closer and see if that helps. So we're going to move a little bit closer.
Yep.
So there we go. So you get an even more close up of our wrinkles and things now.
Yeah.
So, okay then. So following on from what we were saying, let's talk about non-epileptic attack disorder, or NEAT, for a bit.
Yep.
Firstly, why are there so many different names for the condition, and what is your preferred term?
Well, there are lots of names. I mean, actually, and it is a problem, I recognise that. The names reflect different ways that people think about the condition, different views that people have about what causes it. I would say that actually most conditions have lots of different names. So, epilepsy, for example, seizures, fits, convulsions. So actually, it's not exclusive to this disorder. But for non-epileptic attacks, I suppose non-epileptic seizures or non-epileptic attack is the most commonly heard term. Personally, I think it's crazy, a bit crazy, so I have to be careful on that, because I know the website. But my own view is that defining a condition by what it's not is a weird thing to do. It's a bit like saying to someone, you have not multiple sclerosis, or you have not stroke. I mean, it's back to this business of people need to know what they do have, not what they don't.
What they don't, yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's called that because many people, for 80%, 70, 80% of people with that disorder, their events do look a lot like epilepsy. But actually 20% they look like faints. They don't look like seizures, epileptic seizures at all. We have other terms like so we have dissociative seizures or dissociative attacks, which I do prefer. It's still got its problems. But dissociation is the medical word for going into a trance-like state, where you're kind of there but not there. And that is the best explanation, or the best way we have of conceiving the state that people enter when they're in these attacks, when they are in an altered state that they can't respond and often can't remember what happened.
Right.
So whether they experience symptoms of dissociation or not, they are, if there's a blackout where they can't remember it, they are dissociating. That is a term that's in the World Health Organization, adopted as well. There are lots of other terms as well that are really unhelpful, like pseudo-seizures.
Don't we just hate pseudo-seizures?
Which makes it sound like the person's faking, or they pretend they've seen someone having an epileptic seizure and they just want to mimic it or something. It's really, these things are really not helpful. There's other terms like conversion disorder, which comes back to what we talked about earlier, this idea that it's all stress-induced. So, which again, not helpful. To me, the words like conversion disorder and somatization, it's a bit like saying to someone with a stroke who's been a smoker, it's a bit like saying you have smoking-related paralysis. You're saying to the patient, you're putting what you think the cause of the condition is into the diagnosis, and maybe that's true for some people who have strokes, but for a lot of them, they don't smoke.
No,
so that's not relevant.
Yeah, so it's not relevant.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm hoping you can all hear us a bit better now. There was some trouble with the sound earlier on. So perhaps if somebody would like to comment, can you hear us? Can you see us? That would be really, really helpful. Okay then, so what is the difference then between an epileptic and a non-epileptic seizure? And why are so many people wrongly treated for epilepsy for a number of years in some cases before getting the correct diagnosis?
Yeah, so you're right, there are lots of people who wait a long time for diagnosis. That's sometimes because of, well, quite often it's the difficulty of just making a seizure diagnosis, because we're relying on the witness history. It's difficult for people to describe what's happened. And sometimes I have patients where I'm just not sure what the diagnosis is, because I haven't had a good enough witness history. I haven't been able to see the attack. So that's one reason. The other reason is lack of awareness of dissociative attacks and how common they are. And actually, they're 1 in 7 patients in the first fit clinic, 50% of people with status epilepticus.
Those are quite interesting statistics.
They
so
are.
1 in 7?
1 in 7, yeah. If you go to a first seizure clinic, which are run in most centres, 1 in 7 of those patients. So every week in that clinic, there'll be on average 1 person with this diagnosis.
No, that's interesting.
So there are lots of reasons why diagnosis is delayed. And I think, did you ask how do you tell the difference? Or
yeah, what's the difference between I mean, how would you be able to tell that
So what I'd be looking for is really a description of what the person, or partly what they experience. So there are clues. For example, someone who has a very long build-up to the event. Typically, if someone does have a warning, they might feel a bit spaced out, which is that dissociative feeling. They might get some symptoms to do with their body being on red alert, so they might feel hot or sweaty, and when people have symptoms, typically what happens is those symptoms ramp up over time, and often people become rather unbearable. Actually, that's what people will say. But the diagnosis mainly hinges on what happens when they then have the seizure. So someone with a dissociative seizure there are things that happen in dissociative seizures that don't happen, or very rare in epilepsy. So someone's eyes being tightly shut throughout the event, whereas people with epilepsy, the eyes are open, or partially open. If someone's breathing quite fast during the seizure, that would give you a clue about dissociative seizures, but someone with epilepsy, their breathing stops. Now, you've got to be careful here. This is why you need a neurologist, because there are people with epilepsy, there are patients with dissociative seizures where they do stop breathing, or seem to. There are people with dissociative seizures where their eyes are open.
Yes.
So we're looking at a whole range of factors. Long duration events, quite typical for dissociative seizures. So epileptic seizures are often over within about 90 seconds. Someone has a seizure for 10 minutes or so. A sudden event where someone falls to the ground, lies still with their eyes closed, and is unresponsive for many minutes. That's a red flag for dissociative seizures. But but don't diagnose yourself based on this video.
Well, no, quite, yes, exactly.
These are just examples, and there are exceptions to all of these, and that's why you need someone who understands those diagnostic difficulties to make this diagnosis.
Right, okay. So the most commonly cited cause for need is stress, with trauma being a big factor. For many people, though, that just isn't true. So what other causes are there?
I think it's a bit like asking the question, why do people get panic attacks? And panic attacks are interesting because they are very common. Most people understand that they are a genuine thing, they're not scary for people. They will also understand that some people with panic attacks have vulnerability to stress, and maybe had bad things happen to them, and that's why they're sort of their alarm systems triggers easily. But most people also know someone who may have had a panic attack out of the blue. So just in Asda one day, they don't know why it happened then, it just did. And they can't really figure out why it happened. I think most people would recognise that.
Yeah.
So for people where they've not experienced stress or not, then I think sometimes it's the first event is quite important. So you might be in Asda, it might be a hot day, when you need clothes, you're a bit dehydrated, you're feeling a bit faint. Things can trigger from that sort of physiological experience of feeling a bit faint, or sometimes people just have a trip and they fall over or something like that. It's embarrassing for them. But then triggers their first dissociative event. And I think once you've had one event, then that's all you need. In terms of stress, often the biggest stress is the events itself.
It's having seizures,
The experience of having a blackout in a supermarket and the embarrassment coming round and everyone making a fuss, and you might have hurt yourself. It's a horrible event for people, and that event itself seems to leave its mark on people's nervous system and patterns of behaviour that then seems to make another event more likely. In the same way that if you have a panic attack in a cinema, you kind of have a thing about cinemas. I'm not sure you want to go in cinemas, and so that's how I would try and understand many attacks. I think in some people it's just not clear why they've had their first event.
They just do.
It just happens. I don't think there's always a reason for things. It's a bit like, why do people get migraine? They get it because it runs in the family, or that sometimes they're sleep deprived, but sometimes they just have a migraine for no reason at all.
Yeah, so that's kind of true. Sometimes we just have the seizures for no apparent reason. Okay, so our seizures are all very different. Some people might have like a pain in their head, or like a painful spasm. Other people might have like a temporary paralysis, either during the seizure or afterwards, or their speech suffers. And still others have kind of absence type seizures where they just kind of go blank and perhaps are staring. Or sometimes people come around to find that they're walking in circles or behaving in a peculiar way, or have started shouting at people. There's all these different kinds of different versions of sort of seizures. So can you explain as simply as possible what is happening in the brain and the body during the different types of seizure? Is there a particular reason why it's so different for each of us?
I think one of the things that can help us link all those different, because on the face of it they seem very different, those experiences. But I think one of the things that can link them together is the idea that during these events there's a disconnection in the brain, and that's essentially what dissociation means. There's an abnormality of the way that the brain is working. So the person who can normally control their arm and leg during this event, they can't control it properly because their brain is not properly connected to their arm and leg. It's not that there's anything damaged or broken, it's just not the software has gone wrong at that moment. And so and I think it's quite helpful actually generally in FND to think about, so many people who have sort of stroke-like presentations, for example, will report when they have these acute events, they feel a bit spaced out. They sort of have an almost like out-of-body type experience. And then things improve slightly, but they, instead of recovering all of their bodily functions, if you like, half their body comes back to normal, but the other half stays as sort of out of body experience. They're still disconnected from it, so that's why they can't move it, or they're disconnected from the ability to speak, or they might be awake and can see what's going on around them, but they can't speak.
No, they're not able to
they can hear, but they're in a place of their own. People describe being sort of floating, and it's usually described as an intensely unpleasant experience. That to be so out of control of your own body.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, having experienced the sort of the post-seizure paralysis myself, I know how that feels. So it is most unpleasant for everybody.
Yeah.
So why is it that some people's seizures change over time? So they might present with, perhaps an absence type seizure, and perhaps then later on have a more kind of convulsive event.
Yeah. No, that does happen, and I suppose there are different degrees of severity. So someone having an absence event is dissociating enough that they're going into this trance-like state, but they're not so dissociated that they then lose control of their whole body. And we do see patients having different sorts of attacks. Actually, people's attacks stay, don't vary as much as many doctors think. But you're right that they do change over time. Something that we often see is that patients will initially have some warning symptoms, and over time those warning symptoms will get shorter and shorter until they're just a few seconds, and then very often not be present at all.
At all, yes.
And what's going on there, I think, is that the seizures are becoming a sort of habit that the brain's developed, a habit that nobody wants, the patient doesn't want.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
But instead of previously, where they'd get a little bit of warning, things would escalate, and then they would sort of have the seizure. In a way, the seizure gets rid of that horrible feeling when people do have it, and that's partly why the brain learns to do it. It learns that one of the ways it can get rid of the horrible feeling by making you pass out, even though the person doesn't want to pass out.
No, obviously.
But then over time, that habit gets sort of life of its own and just gets triggered all by itself without any warning symptoms. So that's one of the things you have to kind of unpick when you're treating somebody.
Okay.
That kind of evolution is quite important.
Right. Okay. So I hope you can all still hear and see us. If you've just joined us, it's just to let you know that I'm Amanda. I'm from FND Action, which is a charity set up to help people with functional neurological disorder. And I'm here with Dr. John Stone, of the Western General Hospital in Edinburgh, who is a consultant neurologist who specialises in functional neurological disorder and non-epileptic attack disorder. Okay, so moving on from that, some people find certain types of lighting, for example, in a supermarket or loud noises can be triggers, and some people are even affected by strong smells, perhaps a very strong curry or perfume or something like that. So can you explain why this is?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. You're right. I mean, lots of patients do report that. I think there's different ways of looking at that. One thing many patients say is that the environments with a lot of sensory stimulation, like supermarkets, are difficult for them. It's almost as if the brain is just getting overloaded by all this information and noise and light and things like that, and that induces a sort of altered brain state that's not that different to this red alert brain state that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
So that's one reason, I think. The other is that seizures in some patients, that seizures can become connected to particular stimuli in their environment. So, and that's sometimes to do with what happened the last time they had a seizure. So if they had a seizure, if there was a strong smell, curry smell, and they happen to have a seizure with it, then if they have that smell again, the brain has a capacity to make these connections without you being aware of them. It's not you thinking, oh, there's that smell again, I wonder if I'll have a seizure. Your brain's doing it for you and starting to, if you like, run that abnormal program, that abnormal bit of software that's wormed its way in and is causing the problem.
Yes.
So we talk about conditioned responses in neurology and psychology. All animals, all human beings are prone to having these sort of conditioned responses where one thing gets connected with another thing at a level that's not conscious.
Not conscious,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. Okay, so you spoke earlier about the video evidence that's taken by friends or family of the person with need, and it's often quite important in the diagnostic process. So can you give any hints or tips to people on what's the best way to video a seizure?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the first thing to say, I think one of the things that there's a problem here, which is that getting a camera out when someone's on the ground having a seizure is a weird thing to do. Okay?
Yeah.
So I think if the patient, it's often worth spending time with friends or family, just explaining to them just how useful this is, how they won't be upset to be videoed, how having a good video of a seizure actually can prevent someone waiting months and months for video telemetry and it will avoid the need for investigations. So it's just really helpful if someone can do it. The best types of video are ones where the person holds the camera still,
Yes.
where I think if we can get a focus on the face and eyes, or at least part of the seizure, so we can have a good look at the eyes and see what's happening, see if their eyelids are flickering, in what way are they flickering, are the eyes moving, and then panning out to see the body movements. I mean, modern cameras and smartphones are great, so I mean, probably the default position, just try and get the whole person in, but including the face, if you can. And keep filming and try and keep if possible, just make a note of the time and how long the actual seizure lasts, because the duration of the seizure is really important to us as neurologists. If someone's having a seizure that's 20 seconds, that's really different to someone having a seizure who's 3 minutes. A lot of people, you'll say, how long was it? They'll say, oh, it was really short. And say, what do you mean? Oh, it's a few minutes. And they say, do you mean a few minutes? Could it have been 20 seconds? Yeah, it could have been. Actually, it makes a big difference. So, yeah, but the video tells all normally.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, presumably, it would help if you can start videoing as soon as somebody starts to feel a little bit like, if you do get an aura or warning, that if you can get maybe a family member or a friend to start filming from that point, as in before you necessarily go into the seizure.
That would be great if that's possible to do. I know it's difficult to often get that, but videos are really helpful. Actually, interestingly, more helpful probably for dissociative attacks than they are for epilepsy, because they tend to go on a bit longer. People have a bit longer to
actually get the camera out and start filming and start filming. Okay, so hopefully that's helped everybody to understand the importance of actually why your doctor's asking you to video a seizure. It's not because it is actually a very important diagnostic tool.
Yeah.
Okay, so the current recommended treatment for need is cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. So there's an ongoing research project which we, FND Action, has actually been involved with, called the CODES trial, CODES, CODES trial, which is researching the effectiveness of CBT. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say that we're still establishing the evidence base for the treatment, because this problem's been ignored for so long. We've still got a long way to go in terms of knowing which treatment's best. So I think psychological treatments, talking treatments are the treatments of choice, because how else are you going to try and tackle this problem at the moment? And the CBT model that was actually developed by Laura Goldstein at King's College, along with Trudy Chalder and John Mellors, is a very appealing one, because it's reasonably straightforward. It's been actually the kind of manual for the treatment for the trial spends a lot of time at the beginning just explaining the condition, helping people get their head around it. But the trial, which really Laura Goldstein should take the credit here for leading this and putting years and years of effort and work into getting funding for this. She's done an amazing job. Involves is a multi-centre trial going on across multiple centres in the UK. It's been a fantastic way of actually spreading knowledge and awareness of the condition. It involves all patients get treatment, usually initially from a neurologist, who makes the diagnosis, and then later on a psychiatrist. It could be a neuropsychiatrist or liaison psychiatrist who's familiar with dissociative seizures. They have to be familiar with it.
Yes.
Many psychiatrists are not. And then half the patients get additional treatment with this cognitive behavioural therapy. There's 12 sessions of CBT, and you can read about the trial at the address is codestrial.org.
Yes, we have a link on our website.
It's actually, for those of you watching, you're wondering if you can be in it. The recruitment's now finished, unfortunately, but it's the largest treatment trial in any type of FND ever by a very big margin. So the trial aims to randomise 300 patients to treatment, and the biggest treatment trial before this was probably of the order of 60, or there was another one that we did in Edinburgh of 120 patients. But
all right, so it's really quite a lot bigger than
that was of a mixed group of patients. So this is a really important trial. Obviously, we don't know what the outcome's going to be. That's why we do trials, to find out what treatments work, what treatments are better for patients. How can we argue for funding for treatment?
Yes.
And we can't do that until you've done a trial and demonstrated that your trial is effective and cost effective as well.
Yes, because obviously, unfortunately, it all boils down to money these days, doesn't it? So.
Well, I think it's reasonable actually in the NHS that we provide services that have proven evidence and are cost effective.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so many people are surprised to be told that there are no medications for need.
Yeah.
Some people are put on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, or perhaps pain medication if it's appropriate, but there isn't anything that you can actually take to stop the seizures.
Yeah.
What are your views on the whole medication question?
So again, there's just a general lack of evidence here, really. So there's one US trial in quite a small number of patients. There was only 15 patients in each group, in fact, which did hint at maybe there might be a role for the same sorts of medications that you use to treat anxiety and panic, that they might be helpful in reducing this red alert state that some patients with dissociative seizures have. But we just don't have any evidence. So it's difficult. You can't say to a patient, I have evidence for using this medication. I think if some patients with dissociative seizures do have quite clear-cut problems with depression or panic. They also have panic attacks, which they typically recognise as being quite different, actually. And in that situation, it's quite straightforward then to go to the evidence base for those conditions and say what things help. Well, psychological treatments there's evidence there, and there's also evidence that sometimes if you use those medications for anxiety or depression, that sometimes they can help too. But all of these things, they have to be individualised to the patient, and I don't think we're not in a position where anybody should feel obliged to recommend or be forced to take medication that they're not happy taking. So those are things to discuss with their doctor and think about. But I think it remains to be seen really what the role of medication is, specifically for dissociative seizures and all FND generally. I have to say I spend a lot of my time reducing people's medications. Particularly painkillers, which are often at high dose and often I think sometimes make things worse. Again, don't change anything that you're doing with your treatment. Talk to your doctor. This is not individual advice here for patients.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
yeah.
Do discuss any medication that you're taking with your doctor. Okay, so now we've got some questions from people in our Facebook support groups. So we'll start off with a question from Paul. Hope you're watching, Paul. Who would like to know if in general, someone has need, they've been diagnosed with need, but they also have other symptoms which perhaps fall under the FND umbrella. Do you call it FND, or is it possible to have other symptoms and not be FND? How would you determine? Is it FND? Is it need? Because we all seem to sort of go somewhere along the line between sort of FND and need.
It is confusing, isn't it? So trying to get your head around the terms here. When we talk about functional disorders, we're talking about actually a very wide range of conditions, including irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, many types of other chronic pain syndromes. And these are all disorders where the primary problem is a disorder of nervous system function, like nervous control of the bowel, or problem with pain pathways. And FND, the term has arisen to as an umbrella term for all of those symptoms that actually present to neurologists. I mean, arguably all of these things coming from the nervous system, but so all the symptoms mainly it refers to symptoms of movement, so weakness, movement disorders, but also sensation. Some people have visual problems, etc. And so it is useful to have terms for the individual symptoms, because sometimes people just have one symptom and they don't, they've got a functional tremor, they haven't got anything else. Some people just have seizures, that's quite common. And then it makes more sense to call it by the individual symptom. But if someone who happens to have a range of these different problems, I think it's quite helpful to know that actually that lots of other people experience that, and they have a disorder where they're having they've got FND, a whole range of conditions. So I appreciate that's confusing, and maybe things aren't ideal, but again, it's not that different to other bits of medicine. Someone can have a stroke and a heart attack, or they've both got, those are both problems caused by problems with blood vessels or vascular disease, but they're completely different symptoms.
Yes.
Like,
So I suppose it depends on which is the symptom that's, so for example, in my own case, it's non-epileptic attack disorder. Somebody else, it might be functional dystonia or functional movement disorder or something like that. But it all comes under the sort of FND umbrella.
It does, yeah. I mean, what does cause confusion is the symptoms like pain and fatigue and sleep disturbance. They're not specifically defined in FND, but they are incredibly common. In fact, nearly everybody, most people with motor symptoms, for example, will have pain, fatigue, poor concentration, sleep disturbance. Is that FND? Well, it is part of the disorder, and we recognise that, but they're not defined as such. So we doctors need to sort this out, really. So apologies to everybody that it's so confusing, but I hope we've gone a little way to try and explain it.
Moving towards it, okay. So not everyone is lucky enough to see yourself or one of the handful of other FND specialists in the UK. So Emma would like to know, how can people who are in an area with no specialist get help?
Yeah, well, how can they get help? I appreciate that does happen, and I would say that things have changed quite a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. We're seeing now in many areas in the UK there are neurologists either have started or about to start clinics for patients with FND. So there is a lot of positive there, but I'm aware there are many places where it's difficult to find a neurologist that may seem interested or is able to refer you. Quite often in many areas they don't have anyone to refer the patient to. What do you do then? I think as much as possible you need to talk to the neurologist that's made the diagnosis. It's quite easy to get upset with that neurologist and be angry with them. Try and if you can talk to them about it and say, look, I really would like some help here. Do you know anybody that you think you might be able to send me to who's got an interest? It might be another neurologist, it might be a physiotherapist or psychologist. There are places around the UK where there is expertise, so it might involve some travelling. I should add, I'm in Scotland and I can't accept any referrals from England. I'm sorry about that. But
we're just lucky we've got you up here in Scotland.
Yeah. Well, there's good, and there's good neurologists in Glasgow as well. So
yes.
I think when I started my functional disorders clinic in 2005, there's probably only one or two other neurologists in the UK doing it. We've probably now got about 7 or 8 neurologists doing dedicated functional disorder clinics. So things are improving. But if you're the patient who's got nobody interested, I appreciate that doesn't mean much to you. But,
sure, absolutely.
We're trying.
Okay, so Jade and lots of other people would like to know, what do we do when the neural I think we just lost you there for a minute. Hopefully you can all see us. Can somebody just comment to let us know that you can see us again? I think we were buffering there for a bit. Can anybody see us?
Yeah, we're waiting for a comment before we carry on.
I'm not sure if we can still see. We'll just carry on anyway, because hopefully this is being recorded, so hopefully it will actually show up. Okay, so Jade and lots of other people would like to know, what do we do when the neurologist says it's psychological and the psychologist says it isn't? We end up being battered backwards and forwards between. All right, so people say they can't see us. Oh, we're back. Thank you, Wendy, for letting us know. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Colin. That's good. Nice to know that you're all there. Sorry about that. I think we had a bit of a hiccup with the Wi-Fi system, so I'm glad you've all got us back. So yes, we were just asking the question about what do we do when the neurologist says it's psychological and the psychologist says no, it isn't, and we end up being battered backwards and forwards between the two services. That's
a very common situation, isn't it? So there's a problem there on both fronts, probably. I mean, many neurologists would do take the view that these are entirely psychological problems. And I think we're in a situation where we have to, accept that people have different perspectives on this. And when they're saying that, the important thing is, do they believe the patient? Do they think that the patient is a genuine problem? Now, the patient may get upset by being told that because they think they're being accused of putting it on or making up. That'd be very unusual for neurologists to actually think that. That's the first thing to say. I've explained why I don't think purely psychological view is that helpful. I think we need a broader view that takes into account both neurology and psychiatry. The other problem then is you've got sometimes patients go to. Yeah, sorry. Sometimes people encounter a psychologist or psychiatrist who will think that their job is to look for stress or adversity.
Finds the trauma,
and then if they don't find that, they may say, oh, well, look, there's nothing I can do to help here.
Yes, that does happen.
Which is also wrong, partly because from a purely technical point of view, these disorders are classified within, they're in neurology textbooks, but they're also in psychiatry textbooks and classifications. So they should feel that even in the absence of any other symptoms, the psychologist should see this condition as something that is within their domain. And very often what they're failing to appreciate is that they can help the patient with seizures. He doesn't have any of these other problems. He doesn't have stress. He doesn't have anxiety. They can help them by looking at the seizures themselves, talking about these warning symptoms, learning about dissociation. How is it possible for someone's brain to switch itself off like that in an involuntary way? Talk about the way that can become a habit that the brain gets into or abnormal patterning. So, and then looking at things like the way the person changes their behaviour because they're having these events and because the events themselves are very stressful.
Yes.
So that's where a psychologist can be helpful. But quite often the psychologist doesn't realise that themselves because perhaps they haven't had the training or understanding of the condition.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's helpful. Thank you. So we had a question via email. Is there any way that this condition is linked to any other medical condition that perhaps hasn't been detected yet, or is ongoing?
Well, we see in patients with dissociative attacks, we see there's a definite increase in other conditions, so particularly other functional disorders, so chronic pain, irritable bowel syndrome, those sorts of things, where people are still looking to see what's the relationship of these disorders to other types of conditions. I think you mentioned Asperger's.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not aware of any particular link to that specifically that those are overrepresented. But it might be that it acts as a vulnerability to, who knows. But I think we're dealing with a condition here which can affect basically anybody.
Yes.
Anybody can
men, women, children, all ages,
all backgrounds. These are not disorders of, high IQ, low IQ, everywhere. It cuts across all social strata. I have patients with functional disorders who are hospital consultants. I have patients from all ends of society, etc. So I think you've got to look at someone's other medical problems and see how that might be interacting with a conditions. So, for example, we know there's a separate group of patients who present much later in life, actually in their 40s, 50s, with dissociative seizures, who quite often they have a history of other quite serious medical conditions, often heart conditions. That's equal men and women in that group. And in those patients, one can't help wondering whether the experience of having a heart condition, angina, serious heart attack, has somehow triggered that alarm system for them, and that's relevant rather than other things.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. We have a question from Gail, who asks, she says, I've heard that severe emotional abuse can damage the developing brain due to the chemicals released by stress. Can brain damage be caused by stress and abuse? Is it a recognised condition?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a tough question because I think we don't know. I don't think we know the answer to that properly. But we do know that people who have severe post-traumatic stress disorder, who've undergone horrific events, and then are in the process of reliving those events on a regular basis, do seem to have some structural changes to their brain compared to people who haven't had that. Now, I think that it's quite likely those structural changes have a degree of reversibility as well. So if the person's able to get treatment and recover, that the brain can change. I think our view about how the brain works is changing all the time, and we recognise that the brain does have a capacity to heal and change in a way that 10, 20 years ago we didn't think was possible. We thought the brain, once it's damaged, that's it. So those sorts of experiences are relevant for some patients. If someone has experienced very abusive experiences, they will often have learned to dissociate at a young age, for example, in order to cope with those experiences. And that brain patterning of dissociation is one reason why they're more vulnerable as an adult. But I think the bottom line here is that these are, whilst they can be very difficult and intractable conditions, they have the potential to improve however long you've had them, however bad the trauma was, or if you didn't have any trauma at all. They have the potential to improve. And it's difficult, and not everybody can find that improvement, I know that, but we must send a message of hope out there for patients that this is that with the right treatment and the right getting a diagnosis that you're confident with, that there is potential for improvement.
Okay, thank you. So we're getting an increasing number of people with young children diagnosed with need coming to us for help. If anything, the service available for children is even worse than it is for adults. We know, for example, that Great Ormond Street is starting to develop, become a centre of excellence for need in children. But do you know of any other areas, or where else can desperate parents go for help with young children? I think
services and research in child and adolescent populations has lagged behind a bit, arguably, and that's something I'm not aware of any other. I'm going to cause trouble here because I should be aware of some other services. There is a service in Sheffield, I believe, and someone's actually made a website in Sheffield.
Oh yes, the Neurokids website.
Yes,
that's an excellent website.
I think these are things to talk to your local doctor about and for them to explore. And if anyone's unsure, they could always go through Great Ormond Street.
And ask them.
So Professor Heyman in Great Ormond Street, I know, has an interest without trying to bombard her with inquiries. But there is, I think we're still establishing where the centres are and who's interested. I'm not sure I'm qualified to say. I sort of don't want to miss anyone out who maybe
exactly,
doing good work.
Not somebody else. Yeah. Okay. So continuing with the sort of the children, many schools are unable or unwilling to cope with children with need, which leads to the child missing a lot of school, becoming isolated from their friends and their peer group. What can parents do to help their child stay in school? Yeah, so that happens a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting to me, because I'm an adult neurologist, but I do have quite a lot of patients who are at school still 16, and I've seen younger ones. I'm struck by how differently schools react to these situations, and many of them react very sensibly, and even without any medical advice, will learn that the person shouldn't be sent home, that they should be just allowed to have their seizure and then be encouraged to return to normal, which is usually what the patient wants anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want people to make as little fuss as possible. They don't want the embarrassment of it, and they just want to return to normal. And it's sometimes been helpful for me to write letters to the school or speak to the teachers and explain that from their point of view, what they need to do is often just what they would do if a child was having a panic attack. It's not a panic attack, but what they need to do is very similar. So if someone's having a panic attack, you don't need to ring an ambulance. You don't need to send the child home because they've had a panic attack. That would be, that just makes the situation worse, really, and amplifies the whole problem attached to it. So I think schools this is a confusing and unusual problem for both schools as well. So I think they need help from the health professionals involved, and sometimes patients themselves can take information along that's helpful. So that's how I tend to deal with that problem.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're coming to the end now of our interview. So let's talk about the future. Obviously, we've already spoken that things have improved really quite a lot just in the time that you've been dealing with functional neurological disorders. There are more specialists now in the UK. There are more centres where people can go in different parts of the country. Looking forward, what kind of research projects are you involved in, and what else are you involved in going forward?
Well, we've got a very long way to go still. I don't want to sort of overemphasise that, but we in Edinburgh are particularly interested in treatment and treatment trials. We're also, I think there's a lot to be done in terms of just looking where are functional disorders in clinical practice. I think there's a lot of areas where there are still patients who have functional disorders that are not recognised, for example, in neurosurgical settings and other conditions. So we're involved in the COAST trial, so led by Neurological in London, where there was a recent trial by the group from St George's, Mark Edwards and Glenn Nielsen, looking at physiotherapy for functional motor disorders. But some very encouraging data from that trial, which was of 60 patients. Again, this is new that we've got randomised trials, treatments for these disorders, but showing really very encouraging data of the sort that if it was a drug for MS, you would say, wow, this is amazing that we have this treatment for this condition. Those treatments, a trial of 60 patients needs to be translated into a trial of several hundred patients and in multiple centres to show that this treatment can be delivered in more than one place and that people can be trained to deliver those treatments. So that's putting a lot of energy into developing those treatment trials. I think we also need energy put into developing structures for health professionals who are interested in. What I see around the country and also travelling around the world talking about this is how interested actually many health professionals are. They want to do better. They're aware this is an area that they've traditionally found difficult themselves, and they want to be able to help patients more. I'm very encouraged by that. So, for example,
so are we.
We set up a mailing list for health professionals called FN Forum, and there's about 500 or 600 health professionals who signed up to that. We are holding an international conference in Edinburgh in September, where we're hoping several hundred health professionals will come. That particular event is not closed to patients, but it's been designed for health professionals because we think this is an area where we need to get health professionals together, talking and to move things forward. So, and from different areas as well.
Yes, absolutely.
But there was a meeting in Atlanta I went to just last month that was organised for professionals and patients, and that was a fantastic event. It was great to be in the same room as patients, talking about their experiences, professionals talking about how they would want to see things moving forward. So this is a new era of the patient voice being heard, which has been until just 5-6 years ago was utterly invisible. I mean, it was just not. There was no patient voice. That is something completely new.
And now here we are, and we're very much for watching. Don't forget that at 2 o'clock we're going to be speaking to Professor Mark Edwards. So if you haven't already heard your question asked, then Professor Edwards will be answering the other questions later on this afternoon. So do tune in later on at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.